So we got to start working with individuals like you and more. So when companies do wake up to this, which is going to be very soon, there's going to be hundreds, if not thousands of companies who want to hire this position. And I will tell you, in a very polarized world, we only focus on, are they for us or they're against us? We only focus on the two sides. There is a good group of individuals sitting there in the middle, and they're neutral. But there is a group of people there in the middle that, with just a little bit of guidance, a little bit of understanding of what this position is, what it's not, what companies are looking for, we could create hundreds, if not thousands, of chief consciousness officers so companies can come hire it.
Welcome to Changing the Channel with Joe Garner, a show about shifting our individual and collective beliefs on what is possible for the future of humanity. As our understanding of how our reality continues to shift, we are at a point of reunification between science and spirituality. What does the world look like when we break free from the generational trauma that has kept most humans playing small for thousands of years and step into our full power as the co-creators of this reality? I always ask that you keep an open mind with this podcast. Ask yourself what resonates with my truth at this time and what does not. Respect your intuition, but see if you can get through the whole show, because there might be that little nugget buried deep in the conversation that unlocks something for you. Welcome back, everyone, to another exciting episode of Changing the Channel. I have an awesome guest. I had heard him on another podcast, and I was like, I've got to have him on the show. His name is Charley Johnson, and he is pioneering the position of Chief Consciousness Officer for companies worldwide. So welcome to the show, Charley. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. So, just kind of understand a little bit of your background. I know that you've had this very interesting journey to get to where you are right now. So maybe you can bring people up on just a little bit of the history of going from for-profit into nonprofit into now, pioneering this idea of Chief Consciousness Officer.
Yeah, born and raised in Utah. As most people know, Utah is very religious, very Mormon. We were not. But we weren't atheist. We weren't Catholic. We weren't Buddhist. We weren't Hindu. We weren't religious. We weren't spiritual. We weren't for it. We weren't against it. As we get into the story, you'll see it began at a very early age without knowing where it began. The family parents never pushed us to church. It was never a conversation. It was not like, hey, don't go. And it wasn't a conversation of like, should we go? It was not a part of our life. I got into business very early at 16. I was offered a job by a lady getting coffee, going to the bank, emptying garbages. I loved being around adults. I did not do well around kids my age. I never went to dances, never went to Friday football games. I was an athlete. I had friends. The seniors always took care of me when I was a sophomore. We never hung out outside of school. It's just, there's so many interesting things when it comes to that. But as soon as I got involved with business, I loved being around them. I loved being the most ignorant one in the room. I loved asking questions. I loved being a sponge. And again, I didn't have anything that was in my background that kept me from being open. The lady that took a chance on me very early on, she passed away a couple years into the business. Myself and another individual were kind of treating the company like it was ours anyways. She was very comfortable in us letting us do that. So she passed away on a Saturday. We took over on a Monday, and it was a good-sized company, 150 employees. No college education. Doing? It was promotional products, manufacturing.
Okay.
Because I got so involved with business so early, I didn't have any college background. My parents, very blue collar. I had no one taught me about business. No one kind of guided me with that stuff. So it was interesting to see how easily I adapted to it. It was great the few years that she was around to kind of help and guide me there. But we were blissfully ignorant to what we needed to do, and we just took off with it. We traveled, we did all the shows. He was the back end, all the operations. I was the sales and marketing, so I was traveling a lot. I flew 2 million miles during those years. And then at the end of, 6 or 7 years down the road, I developed a fear of flying. So this was my first venture into the universe, kind of stepping in and pushing me to do something. as soon as it got to the point where I actually did leave the company, I loved safety and security. I never wanted to leave that business. But that being the face and the marketing and out and trade shows and traveling, me not flying didn't work out well. It caused a lot of chaos between myself and my partner. So I finally left the company. I just had enough. And then I was on a plane a couple months later to Europe. So it had nothing to do with the fear of flying. Nothing. It was just the universe's way of getting me out of that business, because if I had my way, I would have stayed there, right? I would have stayed there. I would have done the safety and security. I would have done the business. We would have grown it. We would have sold it just like he did and been very well off. But apparently I was supposed to be here talking to you about this position and doing things in a more difficult fashion, of course. So when I left the business behind, I was already involved, but I got heavily involved with the Pay It Forward Foundation, the famous one with the book and the movie. We traveled the world. Again, I was on a plane a lot, traveled the world, got tens of millions of people involved. You know, you'll see a lot of news stations that still to this day, a decade later, are doing their Pay It Forward segments. That was all us. There's the Pay It Forward Day that a guy out of Australia created. It really went from, you know, the book and the movie 10 years prior. When we took over, we built a new board. We did it. It just blew up. It just blew up. It was great. So I went from the for-profit to the nonprofit. I went from the for-profit where I thought I'd be, and for some reason it didn't work out. So we as humans, what do? We go the extreme. We go and do the nonprofit. So that was my venture into trying to save the world, in a sense, right? During the time with the nonprofit, the Pay It Forward, I was doing probably what you and most of your listeners do in their late 20s, early 30s. You're looking for self-development, right? I was looking for coaches. I was looking to just be better. I went through a few of them, and they kept telling me they couldn't really help me. It was a very interesting thing. They couldn't help me. The questions I was asking was too deep. They didn't feel comfortable with it. Luckily, one of them finally said, you know, I can't help you, but I think what you need is a teacher. Okay, well, are you saying I need to go back to college? What are you talking about, a teacher? Because if you remember 5 minutes ago, I didn't have a background, spiritual or religious. I didn't know what a teacher was, Buddhism, none of it. So she kind of guided and said, spirituality, teacher, you have deeper questions than I can answer. Well, not knowing where to go, having no clue what that really meant, the universe stepped in again. And a couple months later, I crossed paths with a 85-year-old individual in the sauna at the gym. I was fully clothed as I am now. He wasn't. I was sitting, he was standing, and he decided to come within, a couple feet of me. And he looked at me and said, now, again, I don't know him. I feel like I've known you from a past life. That little comment that I had never heard before in my entire existence broke something open. So I politely asked him to sit down because his, what was in my face. And he started telling me a bunch of questions, or I asked a bunch of questions. I started asking about all of the stuff he wanted to tell me about. He had me read books, et cetera, et cetera. He then led to meditation. I met his teacher. He was 4 months out, 3-4 months out to having something open. I drove up the next day after he introduced him to me. And I just said, listen, I want to learn now. I have no patience. I want to learn now. This seems like something I need. And he was very nice with it and allowed me to learn a day later. After about a month of learning from him, I realized there was something more. Again, I didn't know why I was asking for something more. He mentioned another individual that was a very powerful individual that he hadn't sent someone to for 10 years. And I said, well, okay, let me talk to him. He said, well, you don't mess with him. You don't waste his time. And I said, you saw how aggressive I was with you. Do you really think I'm going to waste this time? Long story short, I had a picture of Steve Jobs on my cell phone because I was a big Steve Jobs guy. Put a dent in the universe, leave an impact, Walter Isaacson books. Well, when I met my current teacher, he was a spitting image of Steve Jobs. Same light beard, same bald head, same glasses. So again, the universe. I wasn't looking for Steve Jobs. I was looking for him. No frame of reference. I simply looked at him and said, I don't know why I'm telling you this, but whatever you tell me to do, I'll do. He had me read a bunch of books. He was having me do things that, a few people on the planet do. He was teaching me a bunch of incredible things. And he wasn't the type of teacher that was teaching me to fill my already overwhelmed mind like all of ours are. He was stripping it away. So he was having me read books to get me to the point where I woke up and said, my God, all of these books, all of this information, all of these religions, all of these gods, they're all coming from the same place. They're all coming from the same source. Why are we killing each other over? Why are we so ignorant to this? Why are Republicans and Democrats just at each other's throats continuously? Why is there so much division? So that is a very compact story of getting around him, understanding consciousness, understanding division, understanding the mind and why it causes so much division. That's what kind of led to this position.
The journey to finding myself started with a shift in how I viewed my health. That is why I am proud to partner with Purium, the transformation company. What if you could support your health with a system designed for today's challenges? Purium is more than a supplement company. It's a solution for regenerative health. Their whole food products include the only clinically proven glyphosate detox, helping you eliminate the toxic buildup caused by modern farming. Pair that with Beyond Organic superfoods and the most efficient source of protein on the planet, and you've got a powerhouse combination to build muscle, improve digestion, and fuel your energy levels, all while promoting deeper sleep. Plus, Purium is mission-driven with planetary health in mind. They're proud to lead the way in a plastic-free movement using biodegradable packaging as much as possible. True health freedom starts here. Experience the power of this regenerative healing system for yourself and witness your own transformation take place. You get 60 days to try it, and if you truly don't feel any benefit, you get fully refunded. I have personally been using the daily Core 4 products and have noticed an increase in my energy and the depth of my sleep. Use the link in the descriptions to get started today and receive at least $50 off your first order over $75. So you trained with him, you worked with him for, however many, was it years? Was this also a short one? Was this like a couple months? And
No, it was like a decade.
This was a decade. So you spent a decade learning from this master. And then you come in, are you working at this point? Or are you still with the nonprofit, or, what's going on in your personal life while you're working with him?
So I'm doing pay it forward for a little while. I went back into the same industry, working, pay it forward, stuff like that. Just living everyday life. And he's the type of individual that anyone who crosses his path and goes as aggressive as I did with him, they usually leave the world behind. They'll go off to India, or they'll just meditate, or they see through everything. They see so clearly that they just have a very hard time being in this 3D existence, which I assume a lot of your listeners and watchers can relate to.
Struggle with, yeah, for sure.
Struggle with, yes. For some reason, I spent a decade with this individual, very cool, calm, very powerful, can do things you can't even imagine. I thought that I needed to get rid of my passion because my passion was my ego. My ego was what was causing all of this trouble. Well, as you can see, as we start to talk more about this, it didn't go anywhere. And I had access to the highest level people on the planet. I meditated like more than people can in 100 lifetimes. I had access to the information. I had access to individuals to strip it all away. Still here. Ego's still here. My passion's still here. So the universe again stepped back in and said, you're not leaving. We need you to bridge the gap. We need you to bridge the gap between spiritual and non-spiritual. We need you to have access to all of this information so you can take very complex topics and explain it simply. Kind of remove the mystique, remove the mystery, remove the unknown from it. Talk to anyone at any level about their experiences. Have them talk about mystical and magical things and bring some normalcy to it. Then, after doing that for a while, 5-6 months ago, the position of Chief Consciousness Officer came into my mind because just channeled to me. Because where else could you gain access to the vast majority of the world? Everyone needs a job. And where would you gain access to every level of individual, every level of consciousness, every level of
Right.
intelligence, every level of whatever? Because most of the stuff we do with businesses are for the executives. It's a 1 week, it's a 4 week, it's an 8 week. Okay. What about the other 50 weeks? What about the middle level managers? What about the VPs? What about the customer service agents? What about the people that you're only dealing with the executives? I've always wanted to talk about consciousness, talk about the vast resource of this product that we are, and have everyone have access to it, because that's who we are. Consciousness is fundamental to our reality and to our experience. Everything is consciousness. Why is there only a select few people that talk about it? Or it has to be spiritual. It's not spiritual. It's tactical. It's everything you and I do. It's everything physical and non-physical. It's the last frontier. If everyone understood the source of everything, which is consciousness, not the middleman mind, it drastically changes everything.
Yeah, it changes your whole perspective, your whole reality. It changes how you show up every single day. If, that person that you're in charge of, you realize that they are just a representation of a little fractal piece of you, or of who you could have been, or a potential reality that you could have experienced. You're going to treat that person differently than you're going to treat, oh, that's just, some guy that they hired 2 weeks ago and I got to train him and do this whole thing. Like, and bringing that cohesiveness into an organization is going to set that organization apart from any other organization that is founded on division, separation, hierarchy. Again, you're going to have a hierarchical structure, I would assume, in these organizations, but it's not going to be hierarchy for the sake of hierarchy. It's like, he's been here for 10 years, so he's got to move up. It's hierarchy based on competency and how well you can manage other people, I would assume.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Technology took over business 30 to 40 years ago, 30, 35 years ago. Everyone knew it was taking over. Everyone knew things were moving online. Everyone knew they needed a website, an online presence. No one within the organization knew how to code. No one knew how to put a URL up. No one knew how to build a website. We knew what we needed to do, but we couldn't do it. So what did they do? They hired chief technology officers. And now the CTO is a staple in the C-suite, even for small, really small, medium, large companies. The next focus, the final focus of humanity, is consciousness. You're going to want someone on staff that understands consciousness at a very high level, a very clear level, and can explain it in a way that anyone can understand it. They can talk about it from a spiritual existence. They can talk about it from a tactical experience. They can talk about it from structure for the CEO. They can talk about it to help the chief marketing officer come up with new ideas. Maybe the sales team needs new ways to go after customers. HR can hire differently. Even the chief people officer, they can start to better understand. The really big key to this position that businesses have never had is neutrality. That's the key thing. In a very polarized world of Republican and Democrat, a very polarized Catholic or atheist, a very polarized executive and employee, boss, employee, everything's divided because of this mind, because of this middleman. That's all it knows is division. You're going to want someone on staff who's neutral. They've never had that. They've talked about it, just like I would ask you and like I've asked the other 50 hosts that I've talked to in the last month. Do you know someone neutral? And they usually say no. I know people who say they are, but I mean legit neutrality. Because since the beginning of time, we can go into neutrality. We can go in if it's right or wrong. We can go into Republican, Democrat. We can go into sides. I'm not a side guy. So what I do like to explain is this. Since the beginning of humanity, we've had sides. We legitimately believe that at some point in the future, our side's going to win, the other side's going to lose, everyone's going to be okay with that, and we're just going to move off into the future. We're intelligent people. We're educated people. We have technology. We know what we're doing. Yet, two 170 IQ Harvard grad individuals can absolutely despise each other because one's a Republican and one's a Democrat. We can kill each other over one God versus the other. We can say to each their own. We can have a coexist sticker on our car. We can have 10,000 books on happiness. We can have more self-development and books on life hacks, on retention rates within organizations, reducing burnout, right? We've never had access to more of that information. Yet there's never been more burnout. There's never been less retention. There's never been more division, more conflict, and there's never been more unhappiness. I'm not pessimistic. I'm not even a realist. I'm just saying these are the facts. This is something that no one would disagree with. So let's get down to the source. Let's get down to the source of consciousness, the neutrality of it. Let's understand that the division that's created throughout this planet of everything you could possibly think of was because of this.
Right.
This mind only knows division, only knows this or that, right or wrong, Catholic or atheist, Democrat, Republican. Einstein said the same mind that creates a problem can't solve it. Well, the same mind, this mind, a 170 IQ Harvard grad mind, created this structure. It created different religions. It created different political parties. It created all of this. Well, we're going to have to come at this in a different way, or we're just going to continuously get the same results. We got to get to the source, and we got to allow customer service, VPs, middle level managers, executives, everyone on the planet understand they have access to it.
Right. And I like what you said at the beginning. Again, all these divisions are basically trying to, at least from my perspective, they're trying to incorporate a truth, a knowledge, a wisdom that kind of transcends this 3D reality, right? And they're trying to explain it from their limited perspective of the experiences that they've had, the society that they grew up in, the teachers that they've had, what their parents shared with them, what their religion shared with them. They're all trying to put this truth together, and they believe that they've found the absolute divine truth, or maybe they believe that they haven't found any truth, and they're agnostic. They're like, well, I don't know if there's any truth out there at all. And yeah, to kind of bring that into, I think the largest structures in the world, the structures that do seem to be kind of running the show. Again, we talk about, a lot of people talk about this idea of, corporatocracy, where essentially the corporations are taking over where governments used to run. These corporations are kind of stepping in, and government's pushing back, and corporations are pushing back. And there's kind of this, I don't know, you could call it a battle, or it's just, it's a jockeying for position, for power, for, to be able to be the controller of the future of humanity. Why wouldn't it make sense to bring consciousness into those organizations? Just like in the 1920s, when a lot of cities and municipalities and even the U.S. government would go to their pastor, their father, their the spiritual leaders of the time for information, for guidance, for perspective. I think that's where we are in 2025. Is that consciousness, the people that understand consciousness are the ones that need to be kind of a filter for everybody else in that particular organization. I would assume this is kind of where that chief consciousness officer comes in, is that they're filtering their ideas, their information through this chief consciousness officer, so that maybe they can get a clear reflection on some of their biases, some of their kind of subconscious beliefs. Is that kind of the idea behind it? Finally, a place for listeners to gather and share. Join the Ascension Update Substack for messages and updates from our brothers and sisters helping with the Ascension, articles on the future of humanity, and a Q&A where you can ask my guides anything you would like. This is the hub for everything Ascension related. Click the link in the show notes or go to joegarner.substack.com to stay at the leading edge of this movement. And now, back to the show.
Yeah, so think the greatest thing my teacher ever did was help me understand the mind and consciousness. So when I hear these conversations, I immediately pick up on where anyone listening would go to, and they're going to go right to what you said. In the 20s, we would go to our pastor, we would go to our religious leaders, we would go to our spiritual leaders, right? And we would seek their advice. That's still division, right? We would go to our Catholic bishop, we would go to our Mormon bishop, or we go to our Catholic priest, or we would go to our spiritual guy, which most likely was Hindu or Buddhist, because of that's the construct of how we looked at it, right? That's still division, right? So this is not a spiritual thing. This is not like I've talked to a few people who just wanted to understand the position, and they were talking about how in India, a lot of families will have a spiritual advisor on everything they do in their existence. That's great. I'm not saying any of this should stop, because it's not going to stop. That's not consciousness, right? That would still be a religious leader. That'd still be a spiritual leader. And the other heads, tails of the coin. There's religion and there's spirituality. There's Catholic, there's atheists, right? There's always the question of which one's better, heads or tails. Well, any intelligent person, well, any dumb person would say they're the same. It's the same coin. No shit. Then why are we having this discussion? Why is there so much division? Why are we killing each other? Why do you hate each other? Because you're Republican and you're a Democrat. So this consciousness thing is going to be a secret weapon for everyone inside the company at every level because of the neutrality. Yes, back in the 20s and leading up probably till now, we would go to our Catholic priest for advice. We would go to our Buddhist yogic teacher for advice or guidance, right? There's still division there. Our heart's in the right place. We claim to each their own, but this world shows differently. This position is the neutrality that humanity's never had. This is the position that as this planet shifts in consciousness like it's never done before, humanity's never experienced this so quickly. This is the position that helps people through it. This is the position that's going to help a Catholic, and it's going to help an atheist. It's the position that's going to help the Republican and the Democrat. It's going to help the religious person and the spiritual person. It's going to help the CEO with structure. It's going to help the HR with hiring. It's going to help marketing with ideas. It's going to help the customer service person realize that whatever they experience, or maybe they're seeing certain things, that it's not as crazy as they think, because they have no one in their family they can talk to. Like, imagine having someone on staff who can talk about literally anything anyone in the organization can experience. Imagine having someone on staff that if the executives did a 10-day silent retreat and they came back and they had questions, they could answer them. Imagine, just Susie and Ed in customer service just don't like each other because they're Republican and Democrat. Simply asking them from a neutral standpoint, what's better, heads or tails of the coin? Being able to curiously ask the question in a neutral way, so Susie and Ed are not restricted. They don't close off. Having someone on staff that opens people up, expands consciousness, expands awareness from here to here, right? Mm-hmm. This position is so different, so new, and so critical and so important for the future that I very much appreciate individuals like you allowing me to discuss this, because you guys ask really good questions. But what needs to happen, just like my teacher did to me, is I need those questions to be asked, and then I need to break them down in a way they've never heard before. Because to your point of back in the 20s, we'd go to our bishop. That's, to most people, that's either a yes or a no. Right. It's neither. It's neither. I want to explain what that means. I want to explain the difference of going to consciousness, because this chief consciousness officer is not going to change your Catholic views. They're not going to change your Buddhist views. They're not going to take you from atheist to thinking there's a God. They're not going to make you all of a sudden love Trump when you were a Biden guy. That's not the point. That's not the point. It's neutrality. And the more humans hear this, the more your listeners hear this, it just starts to plant a seed. This position is not about changing ideas, because that's all every side's done in the first place, right? And again, we don't talk about politics. We don't talk about religion and work. But I can promise you, if you've spent a couple months there, if you've been there a couple of years, you know where everyone stands. Right. You know where the HR officer stands. You know where the CEO stands. You know where your boss stands. You know where that employee that you work with stands. Because maybe you said something about a religion or just off topic, and you saw them roll their eyes. Everyone knows where everyone stands. The one thing, businesses, politics as well, you talk about being bipartisan and jumping the aisle. Imagine having someone like this on staff. The one thing we've never done, ever, legitimately ever, and I'm not talking a spiritual advisor. I'm not talking about a wellness program that comes in and ask a bunch of Catholics to meditate. They think it's Buddhist and they're turned off by it.
Mhm.
No shit that the last 20 years of wellness programs haven't done as well as people thought they would, even though their heart's in the right place. The only thing we haven't done is had someone on staff who understands the whole picture, understands both sides, won't choose a side, and is neutral. So to me, it may be a disaster. It may not work, but we've never done it. We've never done it all of humanity. But I'm just talking about now, business. Business is important. Like you said, corporations really run the world. Well, let's have someone on staff who can really start to shift. And when you take someone from this perspective to this and you start to open them, you're opening them up to others, to the other side. You're opening them up to other answers, to different questions. That creates less division and conflict. And if we can just minimize division and conflict within the organization, people at home, in government, in politics, just a little bit across 8 billion people, that shift on top of the shift of consciousness on this planet would change things like people have never seen before. And I know people make that comment all the time. If you do psychedelics, it'll change you like you've never. Cool. For you, yeah, that's fine. Perfectly fine.
Right.
If you find God, it'll change. Yes, it's done that incredible. Oh, or if you switch this, if you do that, if you change from Republican to Democrat, if you open your eyes, feel it in my bones. Catholic feels it in their bones that they're right. An atheist feels it in their bones they're right. A Republican, everyone feels it in their bones that their side is right. I'm not saying any side is wrong. I'm simply saying we've done this forever. We keep increasing division and conflict. We're not minimizing it. We want to leave things better for our kids. We want to leave the planet better. But we keep doing the division and conflict, and we always point the finger to the other side, and they point it back to us, and we wonder why things aren't shifting. I just want to bring awareness to that right there. Well, what we have done, there's been a lot of incredible facilitators, teachers, books, Whole Foods with conscious capitalism, right? So there's a lot of groups, tens of thousands of people within conscious capitalism. There's a lot of conscious leaders, conscious management, conscious companies, whatever. These are incredible. They work, right? But they're usually focused on the select executives that can afford it, or the company wants to put their managers through it, not the entire organization. And that, I think that's where the trouble is, because what's being taught is not wrong. The experts are not stupid, they're intelligent. The facilitators are great. But just like the 10,000 books on happiness, yet we've never been so unhappy. What am I missing? Right? Why are we, not only why are we still divided and conflicted, but why are we divided and conflicted more than ever with access to all of this amazing stuff? And I've crossed paths with many of these facilitators. What they're doing, again, love it. When I talk to them, love it. Credible. But they're still only working on the executives. If the executives don't understand really what that means, it's not going to bleed down to the people they work with. It's not going to bleed down to their employees, which it doesn't seem like it has if we're just looking at business right now. I think instead of conscious capitalism, we need consciousness, and we need a full-time position, because I think conscious capitalism, conscious leadership, conscious management is still going to be there. So imagine having someone on staff that the executives do a 4-week class with a conscious leadership teacher or a group. Okay. The other 51 weeks, there is someone such as myself, chief consciousness officer on staff, that can answer questions and keep everything going within that 4 weeks on to the other 48 weeks. And it'll bleed down to the mid-level managers. It'll bleed down to the employees. It'll bleed down to maybe even the executives that didn't participate in the conscious leadership. What we've done in the past is 4 weeks on, or 8 weeks, or maybe even 3 months or 6 months. I think we need someone, actually, I know we need someone on staff full time to be there day in and day out in the trenches with the employees at every level to bring consciousness to the organization, to every level. Because consciousness is different than conscious, right? Conscious is our 5 senses. Conscious still focuses, in a sense, on the mind. This is the divided tool. You're still going to be Catholic. You're still going to be atheist. You're still going to be Republican. You're still going to be Democrat. Conscious capitalism and all that. Again, I enjoy it. I know it works. I know why it's growing, why it's spreading. But we need to get to the source of consciousness. Consciousness is fundamental to our experience. Consciousness is fundamental to our reality. Consciousness is everything physical and non-physical. And instead of going off science like Donald Hoffman and Bernardo Castro, or going off on the spiritual top, the best way to describe consciousness, just very simply, is the wise fish swimming through the ocean. Swims by two young fish and says, "Hey boys, how's the water?" The two young fish look at each other and say, "What's water?"
Mhm.
That's consciousness. You and I are swimming in it, right? Your listeners, as they watch this, are swimming in it. 8 billion people are swimming in it. The planet's swimming in it. The universe is swimming in it. Your thoughts are swimming in it. Everything physical and non-physical is consciousness. Because when we break things down, there's nothing there, right? We could go to the Planck scale, and now they're going past the Planck scale. Everything comes from nothing. That is a construct that makes absolutely no sense to me, to you, to anyone on this planet, because we're a physical being. There's got to be some type of physical matter that creates. Well, the most magical thing on this planet, to me, that we take for granted because all 8 billion of us came that way. You and I came from a single cell inside a woman's body.
Mhm.
There was no like miniature anything, kind of like the seed of a tree. There's no miniature microscopic little tiny tree that grows. There's just set. Like there's so many things that we just take for granted because we see it all the time. It's normal to us. Well, the unknown, the mystical, the magical, a chief consciousness officer brings normal to the mystical and the magical so we can start to expand our awareness. Because what we don't know, we fear. If we fear it, we just stay away from it.
Right.
So quantum entanglement, quantum mechanics, anything that's going on with their consciousness on this planet, it's a word that more people are going to start to pay attention to. They're going to have to start to understand, and it's everything. Why wouldn't you want to know where you came from, what you are, what you have access to?
Mm-hmm.
Knowledge is structured in consciousness. Everything you've ever learned is in consciousness. You have access to all the knowledge you've ever wanted. You don't need to go to a book or to a professor or anything like that. You have access to it.
Yeah. And this is starting to make a lot more sense to me now. It's like, so first off, and this is what I talk about a lot on the show, is that, there's a fundamental shift in consciousness that's happening on the planet, that we're going from this divisive, divided set of human beings to a more unified, unitary group of human beings that have, I would say, kind of ideas and drives and purposes that are similar to each other. Again, it's not going to be this homogenous, everybody's the same, we're all robots, that kind of thing. It's going to be, we all understand where we come from, who we are, what our purpose is as a human being. Getting into, these very kind of esoteric or hidden ideas of, even these ideas that, this human experience was an experiment from higher levels of reality to kind of put beings together and see how they worked together. That this was an experiment on how to have a galaxy kind of work together, and in being able to use the human experience, the emotions, the mental faculties, the ability to transcend our physical experience in the human body, which is, I think, probably, from what I understand, is not necessarily the norm in a lot of other physical incarnations, that you can actually have these higher experiences within that physical body. That all of this is being put together for us to make this move in consciousness. And why would we not bring that that move in consciousness, the shift in consciousness, into the business world, into these the most complex structures that we've built so far on the planet, and the ones that have reach all the way down to all 8 billion humans on the planet? Why would we not bring a position and I would think it would be start as a position and then start to grow as more of a division in that organization, in the organizations that actually takes it seriously. This, I wouldn't even call it school, just this like perspective of what's happening on the planet and helping people understand what they're going through within the business, almost as if it would be like having like an on-call doctor for the organization. But this is a doctor that helps you expand your awareness, that helps you expand and understand what is happening on the planet, so that, again, there isn't chaos within the organization as consciousness expands on the planet.
Yeah. So let me try and not miss. There's about 2 or 3 things I want to talk about. Bringing this into business is exactly how it's being looked upon. That's the only way to look upon it. It's already been there, right? Consciousness has been involved with business since the beginning. What the difference is we've all had access to it, but we've had a blank check and we've cashed it for $100. We're now going to be aware of it, and we're going to realize how infinite it is, and we're going to cash that check for a larger sum. That's what this position is going to bring. Mm-hmm. Secondly, now your listeners are probably more in line with what you're talking about. Our soul, the infinite, the galaxy, universe, consciousness, expanding everything. This position would talk about that to the select few that would want to talk about it. But the vast majority of the business, telling them we're an infinite soul, telling them outside of whatever they believe right now, telling them something different than what the God they believe in or the religion they believe in, talking about how once you expand your awareness, everything will be better, right? No, no, right? This is where I think this is why this position could not be super spiritual. Because if someone comes in for the chief consciousness officer and thinks they're going to have everyone meditate and it's all going to go away, you're dead wrong. That's been proven with those wellness programs. You have a lot of Catholics, Baptists, and atheists within this country, right? West versus East. You tell them to meditate, it's the devil to them, right? That's not going to work. That's why there's not a lot of participation within these wellness programs, and that's why there's still a lot of division and conflict. What this position does is it just helps anyone at any level simply move up and expand, right? We won't talk spiritual to the vast majority of the company. We won't talk about these topics that you and I are talking about. We won't talk about all the spiritual stuff that a very select group of individuals on this planet are okay with. They want to learn about. They're okay. Like, there's certain information that once I found out, I was told it was going to help. It didn't help. Mm-hmm. Seeing things as clearly as I do, it hasn't really changed anything in my life. It's made actually things more difficult because I'm not ignorant to the things I used to do, and now I can't do it anymore.
Yeah, that's been my experience as well. It doesn't make it easier being aware of all of these things. It makes it much, much more difficult because, as they say, ignorance is bliss. It's so much easier to live in a 5 cents reality and just make sure that you have enough money at the end of the day to have food and shelter than it is to understand that you're an infinite being that's responsible for all the suffering that you are experiencing in your life, and that nobody else has anything to do with it except for you. It's a much more difficult way to live life, but that's why we're here. That's why we've signed up for this experience. That's why we've come here to experience this, this human evolution.
Yep. Yeah, and like I'm sure you know Dolores Cannon and people like her, right? Mm-hmm. There's a vast majority of this planet that maybe had a very difficult life before this incarnation or have one coming up. And in this incarnation, they're taking it easy. They don't want to hear shit. They don't give a shit about spirituality. They don't want to meditate. They don't care about consciousness, nothing. Perfectly fine. But within the organization, you can help them expand their awareness at their own level to make things better for them. Maybe they just want to pay the mortgage better. Maybe they want to be a better employee in customer service. Maybe they want to be a better middle-level manager that's better for their employees and better at home with their spouse. That position, the chief conscious officer, will help that. Because again, this is a certain position that has neutrality. They have a business background. They understand the spiritual path. But 95% of the time, it'll have nothing to do with spirituality. Nothing.
Right.
And
just
this
being
position,
a good mirror.
This position needs to be able to talk to anyone at any level without making them feel uncomfortable, less than, or like they don't know what they're doing. Mm. That's a big thing with this position. That's a very, I think that's one of the most critical things, the neutrality and being able to work with anyone within the organization and bringing that part of them out that helps them make their own decisions in a more clear fashion. Not an authority, not someone they report to that they have to lie to, but someone neutral within the organization that helps them, the individual, bring out a more clear answer for their family or their life.
Now, I'm curious, how are you going about, are you going about training people in becoming this neutral figure as a chief consciousness officer? And how do you recommend people kind of practice this idea of neutrality?
Yes, we're working on that. We're working with individuals now. I've been working with individuals for many years, but it was more on the spiritual side, right? They've wanted the top of the mountain. So you got to, in a sense, like with my teachers, strip everything away. But people who want this position, again, have to understand they need a business background. They need to understand the spiritual path, but they need to figure out a way to bridge the gap in a way where anyone you speak to feels your neutral energy. So yes, we're working with people now. And what we're doing is unlike any class or 4-week program or 8-week program that they've understood, self-development, anything, because it's a removal. It's a legit removal. It's not about being more conscious within the organization and learning how you can be a better boss and work with your employees or get more out of them, or right. This is a legit, if you're going to be in this position, we need to strip things away. We need to say, okay, and they're very honest. Which way do you lean? Republican or Democrat, right? They'll be honest with us. What are your religious backgrounds? How did you grow up? What do you have an issue with right now? And we just start simply rehashing what's better, heads or tails of the coin.
Mm.
And just to see what they say. What kind of books do you like? Do you realize that you're causing just as much division as the other side that you dislike, right? Just simple stuff. Conversations like you and I are having. Because there's hundreds of people, such as yourself, that have crossed my path and said, man, I can't even explain what I feel when I listen to you talk about this position. This is exactly what businesses need. This is like my dream position, right? And that's the point we want to do. So we got to start working with individuals like you and more. So when companies do wake up to this, which is going to be very soon, there's going to be hundreds, if not thousands of companies who want to hire this position. And I will tell you, in a very polarized world, we only focus on, are they for us or they're against us? We only focus on the two sides. There is a good group of individuals sitting there in the middle, and they're neutral. And in a sense, I hate to use the word, lack of a better word, kind of lost in a sense, because they won't choose sides. And if you don't choose sides, people don't know how to deal with you in a sense. But there is a group of people there in the middle that, with just a little bit of guidance, a little bit of understanding of what this position is, what it's not, what companies are looking for, we could create hundreds, if not thousands, of chief consciousness officers so companies can come hire it. And I think it needs to be taught in universities, within business programs, MBA programs, just like the stuff you see on LinkedIn. Chicago University creating chief AI officers. Well,
Yeah. Officers in consciousness.
Yeah. Yeah. Artificial intelligence is not artificial. It's just intelligence. Where did it come from? It came from consciousness. Everything came from consciousness. So why wouldn't you want someone on staff that understands that?
Yeah. I can't imagine a single business that wouldn't want this in their organization for their employees, again, to differentiate, and again, this is getting back into every business owner, every organization is going to have their level of consciousness that they're familiar with. So for some businesses, this is going to be our competitive advantage against our, who we're up against. This is our competitive advantage, is having this chief consciousness officer. And like I said, possibly having, a division of consciousness inside the organization that is, more than just one or two or three people. Because as you get into organizations that are 200, 500, 3,000, 20,000 people, one chief consciousness officer can't have a single conversation with every single person in that organization, just based on the number of hours there are in the day. So, again, gaining perspective, getting a larger part of the organization to be in this, just helping people understand what's happening in the organization, outside the organization, in their personal life, outside their personal life. all these different aspects that you've touched on today. I think it's going to be, yeah, I don't see that being that far off. I'd kind of love to understand where you believe, how far out you think this is for either major organizations, small organizations, to start adopting and adapting to this new reality.
I mean, like I said, I've done 50 or 60 podcasts within the last 4 to 5 weeks. And a lot of these hosts have admitted they wouldn't have had me on as soon as 3 months ago.
Mm.
So you and I and your listeners know that time, the construct of time is dissolving. So things are speeding up like crazy. Things are kind of falling in on what used to take, 10 years is taking a year. What used to take a year is happening within a day. Things are really speeding up. I assume I get hired within the next month, right? And if that happens, there's going to be other organizations. Maybe whoever hires me, their competition, that's going to wonder what that's about. Plus, this is just getting into the psyche of more individuals, the consciousness of more individuals because of all these podcasts, because of the hundreds of thousands of people who now see it. Most of these podcasts are political, and most of these podcasts are business, entrepreneurial, executive, C-suite type of listeners. Maybe there's a lot of executives who want to bring something to their CEO that they haven't brought to them before, right?
Right.
I think it's quick. I really do. I really think it's quick with artificial intelligence. I mean, that's a whole nother subject that you and I haven't discussed. Most people think a chief consciousness officer would be good to keep the humanity within an organization. So technology takes over. That's we're 45 minutes in. We haven't even talked about that, right?
Right.
So that's a whole nother part, because artificial intelligence is no different than anything else on this planet. It's going to have people for it, people that are against it. So again, it's causing division. So having a chief consciousness officer help people understand what artificial intelligence is, how it's not really artificial, what it really means, how we can use it, how we can utilize it, and expanding everyone's awareness, expanding their own awareness on their own life, so they're not as restricted and fearful. That's a whole nother topic. So things change by the hour, it seems like. It's not like you have to wait a week or a month and everyone gets to settle in. There's a lot of uneasiness. There's a lot of anxiety, even within really intelligent, confident people, because this pace of change is continuous, and we weren't built for this. I wasn't built for this. But having someone on staff that can come and say, this is what's happening. This is why after 20 years of being confident, you don't feel confident as confident as you used to. Why you're having unique fears and thoughts and anxiety all of a sudden. It's not a midlife crisis. There's nothing wrong. This is how consciousness works. And then the other topic is mental health. That is becoming such a big issue. Why do we think that's all of a sudden popping up? Consciousness shifts. It comes up. It brings clarity. Clarity doesn't just show you the good things in your life. Clarity shows everything in your life. So we've got this mental health crisis, but we're attacking it from the level of the leaf, not the root. We're watering mental health from the watering the leaf. That doesn't grow the tree. Watering the root grows the tree. It solves it. It fixes it. The mental health crisis is mainly to do with the shift of consciousness and the clarity. The 8 billion people who have different thoughts, different questions, different worries, everything they thought they knew, they're starting to doubt. That's terrifying. It was terrifying to me to learn when I learned what my teacher. I'm sure you went through the same experience. We hear what we want to hear. When we expand clarity, spirituality, we only hear the good things because that's what we want. We want to get rid of the negative and just have a feel. No, clarity brings everything. Everything I didn't want to deal with for 20 years, still dealing with. Everything I didn't want to talk about, everything I've ever suppressed, clarity brings all that up, and it sucks. So when we talk about a mental health crisis, that mental health crisis is there because people are starting to deal with stuff they've never dealt with in their entire existence. Imagine having someone on staff who understands that, can help people know everyone's experiencing it. This is why they're experiencing it, and bringing a little bit of that anxiety and fear down. That's critical too.
Yeah, that's key. I think that's going to be key for every business. Again, so many people talk about the speed at which things are changing from a technological standpoint. And it's the same with the awareness and consciousness of the individual as well. That's also shifting and changing at such a rapid pace that, yeah, you need somebody to help to guide you, just like you need a chief AI officer, you need a chief consciousness officer. And yeah, again, this makes it just makes such perfect sense to me, and I think to a lot of the people that are listening. Um, so I'm wondering, somebody is in an organization, they think that the chief consciousness officer might benefit their organization. Like, do you have any recommendations on how to bring that into the organization, how to bring that up with leadership, how to bring that up with board members, from your experience of coming into organizations with this idea?
Like any other topic that's different or new, it just needs to be brought up. There needs to be an individual within the organization, anybody, an employee, mid-level manager, a VP, a C-suite executive. Maybe it's a CEO, maybe it's the HR. Maybe someone watching this show is like, I want to bring this up to my boss. Just bring it up and see what happens. And then discussion. I need to
Right.
have a discussion with the decision maker like you and I are having so they can sit there and just grill me. That's what I love about these podcasts is I get all these different questions from different angles. And a lot of
Mm.
these hosts actually had me on because they were so skeptical. And every single one of them went from skeptic to believer.
Mm.
I think I don't I'm sure a lot of people would really like to approach this with their executives, maybe their boss. Maybe they don't know how to bring it up. Maybe instead of going to your boss, if you want to better understand how to bring it up to your boss, contact me. Let's have a discussion on what this position would do, how you could approach your boss, how this would benefit you, how would it benefit your boss, your company, etc. So you can bring it up in a way that when you talk about it to your boss, they're like, we don't need more spiritual shit. Well,
Mm.
that's not what it's about. Well, that's all I hear. And you're right. So that's part of the effort in bringing awareness and conversations like this and podcasts and listeners so they can hear broken down specifically what this position is and what it's not. So just ask if they want to talk to me directly to see how best to bring it up to their business. Great. If they want me to talk to their executives, great. I'm here.
Beautiful. And how would one get a hold of you if they wanted to reach out to you? What's the best way?
Um, I'm sure on the video, you'll do the video notes. I would put best is my LinkedIn, just like you and
Okay.
I connect over there on LinkedIn. I like them to see the conversation. I like them to see the post. They can message me there. My contact with my cell phone, my email, everything's there. I want to push them to LinkedIn.
Beautiful. So you've heard it here. If you're interested in bringing chief consciousness officer into your organization, if you want, if you just want to have a conversation with Charlie and see what he can do for your organization, get a hold of him, check him out on LinkedIn. And yeah, I really appreciate you coming on the show today, sharing with us your journey and what you're working on and how everything is kind of moving towards this new reality. It's really cool to see. I think we could have gotten into probably 15 other different topics and would have had a great conversation, but I'm really glad that it stayed very practical. It stayed very much within kind of the 3D, and that doesn't always happen with conversations on the show. A lot of times they kind of go off and
Thank you for
get
for
deep.
making that point because that is the point. This is the 3D realm. This is the human experience. This is what we're supposed to do. You can go become as spiritual as you want. I did. I was more aggressive than anyone I ever knew. Had access to higher level people than people I know. And what did it bring me to? Being a human, like
Mm.
embodying getting my ass kicked by an 11 and 14-year-old because I didn't get the right ice cream or having to take him to soccer practice or like just being human, going through the experience of money issues and fear and the depression, just all this spiritual stuff just brought me right back to embodying being human. We can talk about quantum entanglement. We can talk about all the spirituality and the science and all that. But for 95% of the planet, they just want to know how to better understand what's around them and to make their life a little bit easier. Consciousness can do that.
Exactly. Yeah, it reminds me of the old proverb, before enlightenment, chop wood, gather water.
Carry
After
water. Mhm,
enlightenment, yeah, chop wood,
mhm,
carry water. It's the same
mhm.
thing. You're always a human. You're in this experience. You're not only are you always a human, but you're always everything else as well. The entirety of the universe. You are also that. So You chose to come here. You've made that decision to be this human being right now. How can you live and leave an impact, or a lasting impact on this human experience, on the world, on the planet Earth? What can you do in your life to create that? And that's what I try to draw out of everybody that comes in contact with me. Like, how can you be the best version of yourself that you can possibly be? It doesn't matter how much knowledge, how much wisdom, all of this stuff really doesn't matter. It just matters how good of a human can you be.
Well, as they say, that everyone thinks of love's the highest level on this planet for highest frequency, highest vibration, but they've done the studies. It's for authenticity.
Yeah, 100%.
Authenticity includes kindness. It includes non-kindness. It includes love, not authenticity. Who are you and what were you meant to do in this incarnation? And what works for one doesn't work for the other. Go figure that out.
Yeah. Beautiful. Well, thank you very much, Charlie. I really appreciate you coming on. And look forward to seeing and following along on your journey.
Thank you, man. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you again for listening to Changing the Channel with Joe Garner. If you enjoyed the show, please follow the podcast, hit the bell to know when a new show comes out, share with a friend, and rate us on whatever platform you're tuning in from. It helps get these messages out to more people to create the collective shift in reality we are here to experience. Make sure you interact with the Q&A and poll sections of the show so I can continue to provide content you enjoy. Finally, check out my website in the show notes to become a VIP of Changing the Channel and join the shift that is happening.